The sun bled across the horizon, painting the vast, undulating plains in hues of gold and rose. Blackstar, a magnificent stallion, stood silhouetted against the fiery sky. His coat was the deepest black, reflecting the last rays of sunlight like polished obsidian, save for a single, brilliant white star emblazoned on his forehead. He wasn't just a horse, he was a force of nature, a symphony of muscle and bone, with an air of untamed power. While the rest of the herd grazed contentedly, Blackstar found himself restless, a strange yearning stirring within him. Life on the plains was predictable: eat, drink, graze, run in playful chases with the younger foals. It was a good life, a safe life, but tonight, it felt small. Tonight, a different sound had reached his ears, a low, rumbling thunder that vibrated not just through the ground, but through his very soul. It came from beyond the hills that marked the edge of their territory, beyond the familiar. He knew, though he'd never seen it, it was the sound of the racetrack. The older horses talked of it in hushed tones, of tame horses and screeching crowds. They warned him away, their stories filled with fear and a lack of understanding. But for Blackstar, the sound wasn't frightening. It was intoxicating. He felt a pull, an undeniable magnetism, to the roar and the rhythm it held. He watched, his keen intelligence dissecting the activity, as a group of riders, hunched low over their mounts, raced across a patch of land, a blur of color against the deepening twilight. Blackstar could feel the speed, the power, the exhilaration of it, even from afar. It was a feeling he had only ever experienced in short bursts of wild abandon across the plains. But there, on the racetrack, that feeling was sustained, amplified, and celebrated. That night, as the herd settled down to sleep, Blackstar found his own place, far from the others. The vast starry sky was his only witness as he faced in the direction of the distant rumbling. He knew, with a certainty that burned like the fire that lived in his heart, that he belonged there, not here. The predictable life of the herd was no longer enough. He was meant for more. The next few days were difficult. Blackstar's restlessness grew, and he found himself drawn to the edge of their territory, his eyes constantly fixed on the distant hills. He longed to cross them, to answer the siren call of the racetrack. His behavior did not go unnoticed. The old mare, Silver, his herd's matriarch, approached him with a worried look in her wise eyes. "What troubles you, young one?" she asked gently. I don't know," Blackstar lied, not willing to reveal the yearning that consumed him, the ambition that felt like a betrayal of his herd. "You seem drawn to the edge," she said knowingly. "The racetrack, it is not for the wild ones. It is a dangerous place." He could see the fear in her eyes, the fear he had to ignore. "I don't understand why it has to be dangerous," Blackstar argued. "I just feel something. I feel like I belong there." Silver shook her head, her mane rippling in the breeze. "We belong here, Blackstar. With our herd. This is our life." Those words echoed in Blackstar's soul, a heavy reminder of his connection to the plains and his herd. Yet, the pull toward the racetrack was stronger. He was torn, his heart divided between loyalty and ambition. He knew that he could never truly be happy until he had followed the path that his heart was urging him towards. The path, so far, that was the antithesis of everything that he knew. He began to sneak away at dawn, always returning before the herd awoke. He hid himself on the far side of the hills, observing the track through gaps in the rocks, taking in every detail. He watched the horses, their muscles rippling as they moved with incredible speed, the jockeys perched upon their backs, guiding their steeds with subtle movements and vocal cues. He studied their training, the way they were groomed and fed, the seemingly endless exercises and routines. He could feel the raw power of the horses, each stride a testament to the training and dedication. He began to understand the subtle nuances of the sport, the blend of athleticism and strategy that it demanded. It was beautiful, intense, and everything that he longed to be a part of. One day, as Blackstar observed, he saw a young man working with a particularly spirited thoroughbred. The man was kind, his movements gentle, his voice low and comforting. Unlike the other jockeys, who seemed cold and distant, this one seemed to truly connect with his mount. Blackstar felt drawn to him, to the quiet understanding that passed between human and horse. He moved closer, drawn by an irresistible impulse. He knew it was dangerous, bordering on reckless. But he had to see, to understand. He carefully hid himself behind a large cluster of rocks, his eyes fixed on the young man. The young man's name was Tyler. He was a lean, unassuming figure, with kind eyes and a gentle smile. He had a way with horses, a knack for understanding their needs and their nuances. He spoke to this particular horse a beautiful, spirited roan, not in commands, but in whispers. He watched as Tyler calmly worked with the stallion, coaxing him to move with speed and grace. As they passed nearby, Tyler's eyes met Blackstar's. There was a moment, a flicker of recognition in his gaze. It wasn't fear, or anger, or even surprise, it was understanding. That night, Blackstar couldn't shake the feeling of those eyes, the way Tyler had looked at him, as if he had seen into his very soul. The next day, he returned, risking everything, drawn by a hope he couldn't quite define. This time, Tyler wasn't surprised to see Blackstar. He approached slowly, his hands open, a soft smile on his face. Blackstar stood his ground, his heart pounding in his chest. "Hello," Tyler said, his voice gentle. "I've seen you watching. You're a beautiful horse." He held out his hand, and Blackstar, after a hesitant moment, lowered his head and nuzzled his palm. Tyler's touch was electric, sending a shiver of warmth throughout Blackstar's body. "You're not like the others, are you?" Tyler said, his gaze fixed on the white star on Blackstar's forehead. "You've got fire in you." He could see the raw power in the stallion, the unbridled energy that coursed beneath his black coat. He knew, instinctively, that Blackstar was something special. Slowly, patiently, Tyler started to work with him, not with the harshness of the other trainers, but with kindness and understanding. He didn't force him, he coaxed him, rewarding each small step with gentle words and a soothing touch. Blackstar was wary at first, but he began to trust Tyler, drawn to his gentle nature and his genuine connection with horses. He learned to accept the saddle and the bridle, the strange constraints that were so foreign to him, but he also began to see the purpose to them. He was still a wild horse, and there were days when the confines of the stables felt oppressive, when he longed for the freedom of the open plains. But Tyler understood his restlessness, giving him space when he needed it, pushing him when he was ready. He told him stories of the track, of the exhilaration of racing, the roar of the crowd, and Blackstar listened, his heart filled with longing and anticipation. The day of the trial race dawned bright and clear. Blackstar was nervous, his muscles tense, beneath his black hide. This was not a race to win, but to demonstrate, to connect, to show them all, he was more than just a wild horse. He had been training hard for months, learning the rhythms of the track, the language of the jockey, of how to channel his raw power into speed and grace. He stood in the starting gate, his nostrils flaring, the roar of the crowd a palpable wave washing over him. He saw Tyler in the saddle, his face calm and confident. Tyler squeezed his knees, and the gate sprang open. Blackstar surged forward, his hooves pounding the earth, his muscles working in perfect unison. He felt the familiar rush of wind in his mane, but this time, it was different. This time, there were other horses around him, their riders urging them forward. He had to adjust to new things, to new pressures. At first, Blackstar found it difficult to coordinate with the other horses. His movements were initially more powerful, less graceful than the other horses. Then the focus came, the connection with Tyler, and with that came a newfound rhythm. He had to find his own path through the pack, a path that felt natural to him. This was not a race, but it was a testament. He began to find his stride, feeling the surge of power within him. He wasn't racing for a victory, he was racing for connection, for self-discovery. As he turned onto the final stretch, he tapped deep into his energy. He wasn't the finely tuned racehorse, he was Blackstar, the wild Mustang who refused to be tamed, his spirit soaring. Blackstar crossed the finish line, not first, but with a presence that was unmatched. The crowd was silent for a moment. They had expected a clumsy display, a wild horse out of his depth. What they had seen was raw power, unwavering determination, and a heart filled with fire. Then the silence broke, and the roar of the crowd was deafening. They were cheering for him, not as a tamed racing horse, but for the wild spirit that shone through him. They had come to witness a race, and they had seen the journey of a heart instead. Blackstar was panting, his sides heaving, but he felt an overwhelming sense of peace, of accomplishment. He had proven that he belonged here, not because of his pedigree, but because of his spirit. He didn't need to win. He had already won. He had won the acceptance of the racing world, the acknowledgement of his power, and more importantly, he had found his place in this strange new world. He had gone from wild Mustang to a horse that commanded respect on the racetrack. The next day, Blackstar stood at the edge of the plains, his heart torn once again. He had found his place on the track, but his herd still called to him. Tyler approached him, his eyes filled with understanding. "You know you don't have to stay," Tyler said softly. "You've proven what you needed to prove. The world needs your spirit, and so does your herd." Blackstar knew he was right. The track had taught him about himself, about his strength and his potential, but the plains were his home, the herd his family. With a final nuzzle, he turned and ran towards the hills that marked the edge of his territory. The herd greeted him with warmth and curiosity. Silver approached him, her wise eyes filled with pride. "You look different," she said, a hint of a smile on her face. "I am," Blackstar replied. "I've seen the world, I've felt the fire in my heart, and I have found my place." He didn't tell them about the races, of the crowds, or the training. It wasn't important. He was back where he belonged, and they could see that.